We're going to move on to consent calendar, item number 2. Who's going to take over?
So I can make my comments. Go ahead, Nathan. Mr. Schmidt.
No, yeah, we could either just go directly to Commissioner Linke. I do have a few slides I could show if the commission so desires for just a brief presentation.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's just treat it like a regular item if you want to.
Yeah, if I might, excuse me, Chair. If I might just add, typically on consent items, what I'd suggest we do is if an item is pulled like this, first the chair will announce that the item is up for discussion, and typically we would just see if the commissioner who pulled the item. There's 2 ways that an item will get pulled. It's either if a commissioner pulls the item, or if there's a public comment, or if staff pulls it. But typically, hopefully the latter doesn't happen too often. So in this case, if a commissioner has a comment, I would like to start off with the comment or the question, and then unless if the commissioners would request a presentation. But as a starting point, I'd like to just address the questions just to try and improve our efficiency and be respectful of everybody's time.
So since it's our first time doing this, raise your hand if you would like Nathan to give the presentation on this item first. Okay, so we're gonna follow what Mr. Frank said next time, but since it's the first time, we're gonna go with Nathan and then we're gonna go with Commissioner Linke.
All right. Okay, so this item is in regards to revisions to the city's transportation impact analysis guidelines regarding the types of transportation impact analysis required. And the recommended action for this item is to receive a report on a revision to the city's transportation impact analysis guidelines to indicate that projects generating less than 110 average daily trips or 11 peak hour trips do not require transportation impact analysis. So just as an overview of the process and why we have the transportation impact analysis guidelines, they are a set of guidelines that the city follows. It describes in detail the required methodology for identifying project impacts for applicable transportation facilities. These guidelines were drafted to comply with federal, state, and local requirements, including the California Environmental Quality Act, the city's growth management plan, and the 2015 general plan mobility element. So this slide here shows the area that would be revised within the transportation impact guidelines. Under direction from the city engineer, staff has revised the guidelines to indicate that projects generating less than 110 average daily trips, or ADT, or 11 peak hour trips do not require any type of transportation impact analysis. The first purposes of this revision was to first address project application review times, workload constraints, and to really streamline the development review process. These revisions are provided in section 3.5, table 1 of the TI guidelines and are shown in the red lines here that you can see. This is exhibit 2 that's on the screen now. So it's essentially just adding an additional category here, less than 110 ADT or less than 11 peak hour trips, which do not require the TIA. The rest of the thresholds are essentially remaining the same. All right, so this table here, for comparison's sake, in the staff report, staff offers the San Diego Traffic Engineer Council, SANTEC, and the ITE guidelines, which are used in the San Diego region as a starting point, as a recommended guideline for agencies to use in San Diego County. The SANTEC guidelines state that a traffic impact study should be prepared for all projects which generate traffic greater than 1,000 ADT or 100 peak hour trips, or they do offer 500, any projects which greater 500 ADT for projects which are not consistent with the local land use policies, such as the general plan, mobility, or zoning maps. We've also provided some additional references here from other agencies, peer agencies in San Diego County. As you can see, they range from multiple agencies, do follow the Santec guidelines in Sanitas with 500 ADT. They also offer a threshold of 50 peak hour trips. And then you can read the rest there as well, just as other examples of what other cities are using for their lower threshold. So in comparison to the Santec guidelines, staff's revisions to include the minimum project size of 100 ADT and 11 peak hour trips would be significantly less than the regionally adopted standards, also the peer agency standards, and this would represent a conservative approach to determining the minimum project size to trigger a traffic impact analysis study. So with that, the recommended action again is to receive this report on the revision to the city's transportation impact analysis guidelines to indicate that projects generating less than 110 daily trips or 11 peak hour trips do not require transportation impact analysis.
Okay, if you stop sharing, then I can see everybody.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Linke.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, the Santec 1000 ADT guideline, and I've spoken with people at Santec ITE that were involved in creating those guidelines. That number is intended to identify impacts that will occur region-wide. So impacting the arterial system in Carlsbad and highway system. So I think the 1000 ADT is not at all a valid comparison to make. Second point is that all of those other cities listed, I think Carlsbad is unique that we have a growth management plan that requires adherence to maintaining a performance standard for each mode of travel. That's not present in those other cities. I personally have not, this is the first time I've seen that slide, so I haven't been able to look at, how Encinitas and Oceanside and San Marcos treat their minimums. If I looked at it, I might find some additional problems with it. I don't know that for a fact though. So for me, what it boils down to is that we have streets that are being exempted from our growth management plan because they're over congested. And 110 ADTs may not sound like much, but that's up to 27 homes, a 55 plus community with the current way that they calculate ADT. It could be quite a number of units put in. And the real goal is to make sure that the pedestrian, bicycle, and transit modes of travel are up to par. So if a development goes in, they're going to put in 27 homes. They should make sure that the sidewalks and the bike lanes and the bus stops are all up to snuff there. The vehicle is, if it's been exempted, it's already not subject to the vehicle standard. So I guess the final point I would make is that I agree that it's silly to force a developer to do a complex vehicle impact analysis when it's clear that on some streets it's going to have no effect, that a small amount of traffic is not going to have an effect. Or if it's on an exempt street, that there's nothing that can be done, or nothing that will be done to help vehicles. But continuing to have developers do the MMLOS analysis, that's a pretty simple thing. You don't necessarily need an expensive traffic consultant to make sure that those things are in line. And I don't know if Mr. Schmidt can put the table 1 back up, but level 1 analysis includes MMLOS, and it said all TIAs must include an MMLOS analysis. Therefore, if you exempt projects below that level, then that analysis will no longer be necessary. So if you look At the very bottom, it says, note, all TIAs will require MMLOS analysis, and the modes evaluated for each study will be determined by street typology and project location, not vehicular trips. Okay, so then if you look above where the red line is, now we're adding something new saying if it's less than 110 average daily trips, there's no TIA required, so that MMLOS analysis will not be done regardless of vehicular trips. And if you look at the table below that where it says level 1, that's the lowest level of TIA that's done now. And it includes the, at the very first column there, MMLOS. So that will just, to me, give a free ride to not make pedestrian bicycle transit improvements if we allow this. It's not the hugest deal, but I think it's something that it would be good to clarify this, to say that no TIA is required for an expensive vehicle analysis, but for MMLOS, it would still be good to look at.
Okay, if you stop sharing, please, Nathan. Okay, other commissioner comments? I see one. Commissioner Pensier.
Yeah, I read through Commissioner Linke's comments on this, and the one that resonates with me the most is that we still don't have an MMLOS system that has been reviewed outside the staff. And we know from some of the earlier versions of it that it's been changed significantly and really doesn't reflect reality. And so, you know, at some point we're going to have to resolve this. And if it takes a change in the TIA analysis to do this, then I think we need to do it. So I know this will be part of the mobility program that that we're still working on, but still, it's a valid point in my mind.
Nathan, you have comments?
Yes, Chair Gokin, just one comment, I think, for both Commissioners Pensiers and Commissioner Linke, is that we do plan to bring back the entire full package of the TIA guidelines, and we would be working, making an overall revision to the TIA guidelines. And through that process, we would be working with the entire commission on folding in those revisions. So that's definitely something that is yet to come.
Okay, Commissioner Linke.
So I don't know how long that's going to take. It could take 2 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years. It's been in the hopper for a long time already. So I just think that in the meantime that we shouldn't make that change. I mean, if there's a commitment by the city to pay for those improvements instead of the developer, that's also fine with me. I don't have any problem with who pays for it. But when the development goes in, I think the mobility should meet the standard that we've set, and we should be following the rules. So if the city wants to make that commitment instead of having the developer do it, that's fine too. But for now, it may fail, but I'm going to move that the commission requests that the TIA exemption be applicable only when a project will not add traffic to street facilities that are deficient under the GMP, and that the exemption should not apply to multimodal analysis.
Vice Chair Perez, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The question that I have with this is just the whole understanding, and I'm just trying to give an example, is if we look at a current situation of, let's say, Highland Drive, where I think I'm pretty sure we're familiar with it, but, you know, just if I need to just give some information, that street going from south to north, you know, there's a lot of crosswalks and things like that to get through Tamarack or through Chestnut, but, you know, there are no sidewalks, there are no bike lanes. So, you know, the question I have is that, you know, is this a high, you know, what's the ADT on that? And then also too, to me, it just seems like this wouldn't be a pedestrian or a bicycle friendly infrastructure. So, for me, that Highland Drive has always been, around. And for me, it just seems like, why is there no improvements or sidewalks or things like that? So I guess the big question that I'm asking is that how is this getting by all of these guidelines that we have for MMLOS and other things like that? So, I guess that's just the point I wanted to make is, would this be an example of where would we stand on this drive for Highland Drive?
Nathan, do you want to respond, or Commissioner Fowler has a question too?
Yeah, I myself am not familiar with the Highland Drive project, but I think, if you're asking, would it require any type of multimodal analysis with this change? No, it would not. But of course, again, I'm not familiar with the size of the Highland Drive project, or the background on that one, unfortunately.
It's not, I don't think it's a project, it's a street that has got houses on the left and the right, and it's got no sidewalk or nothing provided other than for drivers. But it's an old, right? The street is old, it's not a new project. So this will apply to new projects, right? Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler, do you have a comment, Commissioner Fowler?
Well, it's kind of a question. So right now, what are the requirements now? Are there no requirements for studies at all now? And this is part of a new plan, and we are debating over the consequence of a new plan, or are there requirements now to carry out these studies given the current requirements?
So currently all projects do require some type of traffic impact analysis. What this is doing is providing a minimum threshold of project size. So any project that generates less than 110 ADT or 11 peak hour trips would no longer require the TIA analysis.
Okay.
Would there be a possibility to still keep the MMLOS?
For those projects, that's something we could consider as staff.
Okay. Commissioner Pencia?
Yeah, I don't want to confuse the issue, but to address Commissioner Perez's concerns on Highland, I walked that street multiple times during the COVID-19 crisis, and there are some fairly significant lot sizes there that could be developable with multiple houses, but not enough to trigger this. And it's a street that probably should receive some attention from the city apart from this issue that we're discussing now, because it's flat and it has been very, very popular during the COVID-19 crisis by both cyclists and pedestrians. And yes, there are lots of sections of it where there's no sidewalks at all. There are no bike lanes, but the road is so narrow that it doesn't even have a center line. So
we have to revisit that discussion, since that is not on the agenda item right now. So we don't want to go too deep into that conversation.
Okay. Yeah,
but yes, Commissioner Linke.
So just to be even more precise, just using that as an example, we can't discuss that specific example here, but if a developer came in and said, I want to build a building with 18 apartments in it, that would fall, or I want to build 27 retirement homes on this street that has no sidewalks or bike lanes. Currently, they would be required to build sidewalks around their development up to the nearest intersection, and they would need to install bike lanes on both sides of the street. So sidewalks on only their side of the street up to the nearest intersection, but bike lanes on both sides of the streets that are adjacent to their development. So the point is that if this exemption goes into effect, it's my understanding that developers would no longer necessarily be responsible to build those sidewalks and bike lanes. The same is also true for traffic, but in this case, I would say that the traffic impacts or the vehicle impacts are not significant enough unless they're on an exempt street. So that's sort of the implication, I think, of this exemption, unless staff can correct
Does
me.
every commissioner understand what is happening? Yes? Or do you need Commissioner Fowler?
So I'd like that. So what you're claiming is that currently that at least some of those who would otherwise be subjected to the new regulation would no longer be responsible for developing, let's say, sidewalks or bike paths, let's say, on an mostly unimproved street, let's say. Is that?
So this is for new projects, right? So anything that's going to be built from now on, if we allow this exemption, if it's under, let's say, using Commissioner Linke's example, 27 units or whatever units that produce under 110 daily average trips, it will not require the developer to put any sidewalk, improve any bike lanes, anything like that. Again, it's only for new projects. If we don't approve that, if we at least keep the MMLOS in it, then they will, no matter what size project it is, they will require to at least do the biking and pedestrian improvement. Am I correct, Commissioner Linke?
Yeah, unless staff has a different answer to that. This is what requires the developer to do. It's still possible, I think, for the planning department to request that they do it, but these provisions in the transportation impact analysis guidelines sets up a requirement that they do it, and they only have to pay their fair share, and the city probably has to pick up the rest of it. So I'm just concerned that we're letting them off, and then the city's going to be on the hook for all the improvements that need to be done.
Mr. Frank, I see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to also interject just for the commission's information that back in 2014, the street codified alternative street design standards. And so some of the older neighborhoods, they wanted to maintain the more rural feel, and actually by keeping the rural feel without a widened street section with adjacent sidewalks, the traffic speeds actually can be lower, and that can provide actually a more comfortable walking experience and biking experience, because typically walkers and bicyclists are very concerned with vehicular speed. So we're going to bring back that item to you in a future meeting, the alternative street design standards, but excuse me, I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, thank you. We still have a motion on the table. Commissioner Linke, are you still good with that motion?
Yeah.
Do you want to restate it?
I move, and we can't, at this stage, we don't have the power to tell them they need to do what are required. It's just a request. I move that the commission requests that the 110 ADT transportation impact analysis exemption be applicable only when a project will not add vehicle traffic to street facilities that are vehicle level of service deficient under the GMP and general plan, and that the exemption should not apply to multimodal analysis.
Okay, do I have a second?
Yes. Yeah, this is on information, so this is a report, so this is technically a non-action item, but a compromise position may be to register that in the minutes. So I think that's really the intent here. If I heard you correctly, Commissioner Linke, you wanted this to reverberate and have others understand your position on this. So you know, we can't have any action on a report, but if I hear you to say that you want that in the minutes, I think that would still kind of get us to the same point.
Well, I think the motion should be included in the minutes, whether it's, I mean, I would like the motion included in the minutes, whether it's seconded or not, but we voted on other recommendation items in the past. Or, I mean, you earlier you cited chapter 1.20 of the municipal code when, with regard to the minutes, saying that we can only have summary minutes. But I don't think we can pick and choose then whether what subsections of chapter 120 apply to a commission, and the city council can make motions during informational items. The city council can, a city councilor can individually put an item on the agenda. So if we're saying that chapter 1.20 applies to our commission for minutes, it should apply to the ability to make the equivalent of a minute motion, or the equivalent of, you know, an individual commissioner putting an item on the agenda, or it's not being consistent.
Good point. Good point. And I did want to reiterate, just so that everyone understood, that this was a report and not an item that was for substantive action. So to the extent that you're describing, you know, I wanted to just reiterate this was a report. And I also wanted to remind you too that this could also be an opportunity. I assume you'd want that reflected in the minutes, and that's why I interjected.
Right, I appreciate that, and I would like the motion reflected in the minutes, regardless of whether it's seconded or successfully voted.
Mr. Frank?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, just mention that, as Mr. Schmidt did earlier in the presentation, that we hear the commissioner's comments about, you know, wanting to participate, and I think, you know, that's the commission's primary responsibility, is to participate in these type of decision-making items to update guidelines. And so we did want to present this report to you. And when we are updating the TIA, you're definitely going to be an active part of that process, and it'll be a well publicly vet process. So I just wanted to emphasize that we hear that. We're going to do that going forward, and this is an interim step where staff felt like we should make this change in an interim condition, but we know that we're going to do a major revamp of the whole TIA guidelines, and that will be well vetted through your commission.
So right now, between now and the time that you are making those changes, any projects that happen, they will actually be exempt if they are under?
That's correct.
Okay. And if we feel strongly about it, I see you, Commissioner Fowler. If we feel strongly about it, what can we do as a commission to not have that exemption, at least not for the MMLOS?
I think you're doing it, and you're discussing it, and you're going to make your comments, and you're requesting that it be a part of your minutes.
Okay, but then if you have a developer coming and applying for a permit right now, they will still get the exemptions.
That's our plan. That's right.
Right. So that's not serving our intent.
I understand.
Commissioner Fowler.
Okay, so you injected some confusion, because at one point you say, well, right now, the way it works is somebody who comes in could be liable for improvements of sidewalks and bike paths, and that's the way it works. And this will introduce an exemption to those projects. But now you're saying, and it seems to imply that the proposal, the report that we are looking at considering, will be put into effect, or is currently in effect, or what? I mean, what's something's wrong with that, those two statements. They're contradictory. So currently, it is not the case in which somebody walks in with the 28 senior citizen houses, or whatever the requirement is. They would not be required to improve sidewalks or contribute to a fund, or however that works, not be liable to complete the sidewalks or the bike paths Or would they under the old way? That's confusing. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, I'll try and clarify that. So if it's a development project where the city has the ability to condition the project, they would be responsible for improving half the right-of-way width along the frontage of their project. But they would not, if this exemption was in place, they would not be required to do a traffic study to look outside of their project limits. So that's if the exemption was in place. The way the guidelines are currently written is exactly as stated, is every project coming forward is required to do some level of a traffic study, and under the 500 limit is specifically just for the MMLOS. But it's a significant cost, so.
Okay, I guess. Well, I guess the way I think about this is just a comment, if it's appropriate. This has a lot of moving parts, and I don't think I understand enough of it to, make a considered decision. But I do think the solution is putting this in the record and in the minutes, including the letter that Commissioner Linke wrote. And so I think that's a good alternative. Probably does not even require a vote. I'm liable not to vote for anything other than some statement that we discussed it, and look forward to. And it is it's too bad we can't consider it, but I think it would be great for us moving forward as part of our work plan to consider this in detail. But right now, this is just a concept, and I just don't think I have enough information about it to make any kind of hard decision about it. I could see both sides, because we do not want to overburden developers for what would be in essence an infill project and that kind of thing. So I think there's a case for it. So that's the way I feel.
Yeah, so we're not going to go for a vote. We established that. For the record, I am seconding Commissioner Linke's motion. Do we have any other comments? Could you restate the
motion also? Could you just restate the motion, please?
So again, we're not going to vote on it. Just so you know, I'm just seconding just so we can put it in the record, and that's it. But
if you have a motion and a second, don't you need to vote on something?
Well, I guess it is just for the record.
So,
Mr. Contreras.
Okay, well, I know that there's a specific set of procedure in chapter 1.20. And so at the moment I can kind of look through, there's, that's initially why I interjected saying that this was an informational item. It was a report. I believe staff mentioned that a full comprehensive review would come back. I know, I hear the commissioners. Was that 2 months, 2 years? And so the question is, all right, what action is taken in response to a report? Typically it's accept and file, receive report. As we discussed earlier, we have an option to include minutes, commissioners' statements with respect to items which include reports, and we can register certain statements or sentiments expressed by commissioners. Now, I am cautious about recording any kind of action taken, and understanding Commissioner Linke's point about, well, wait a minute, there could be minute motions. And yes, chapter 1.20 does apply to boards and commissions. So to the extent that the commission wants to, make a statement, that's not on the agenda, I would look at 1.20, but I wanted to offer up these other options to the commission about the minutes, and knowing that this item would eventually return.
What about Commissioner Linke, if you want to go ahead?
So, I mean, for me, if I just submitted the letter and made a statement and it was included in the minutes, that's not a very strong statement. That's just one person in all of Carlsbad. I'm on the commission, but that's just me. If someone seconds it, that's better. And we take a vote and a majority of the commission or all of the commission agrees, that's a much stronger statement. But it's still just a request because we don't have the power to direct.
But can we put in the records that who agrees, each commissioner, if they agree with Mr. Commissioner Linke? We don't have to take a vote, right? For the record, this is Commissioner Linke's comments. And then whoever agrees, we also make sure that their name, the commissioner's name, is in the record too. Is that more appropriate?
Can we take a motion and vote on adding a commission statement to the minutes? I mean, that's what the motion is. It's like, I'm just throwing it out. I want to make a motion that the commission adds a statement, and then the rest of Commissioner Linke's comments are in there. And that's the statement we make, and it goes in there. And then we vote on that statement as a commission. So it goes in there, whether it passes, doesn't pass or not. We should be able to do that at any time and particularly for an item that is on the agenda. So it's not something that isn't on the agenda. And it looks like I got a nod from the lawyer over there going, yeah, you can.
Well, and that's where I go back to the 1.20.080 with respect to the minutes. If this was going to be a statement that would be included in the minutes, and if there was, reflection that it was the commission's position as reflected in the minutes, I could be that flexible and make sure that that I'm not setting anything, for future, for future items. I'd make sure to look into this for the future when we have reports and information only items. But if we were to couch this in the minutes, I think the current writing of the municipal code would support that.
Okay, so I'm still confused. What are we doing? How do we make sure that Commissioner Linke's comments and the agreement of the rest of the commissioners that agree, we haven't yet decided they all agree, it's noted,
so Commissioner
Linke
adds to the beginning of his motion that this is for the minutes record, and then the rest of the motion, I think our attorney says we can add that into the minutes as voted on, because I don't think we ought to just say, well, I agree with Commissioner Linke's 3 pages of comments, because there's a lot of comments in there, just like Bill Fowler said, hey, there's way too much stuff going on here. So, but if there's a specific motion and we vote on it, then I have no problem making, my position known on that. And it may be in the exit, abstain. It sounds like Bill might even abstain when we do that. But I don't want to make a comment in the minutes that says, Commissioner Hunter either agrees, disagrees, or whatever with 3 pages of Commissioner Linke's comments, because I agree with some things and I may not agree with other things.
So you agree to just put it in the minutes?
And I think
on a specific motion with, it's a very specific motion. This is what was said, and then put it in the minutes.
And I think what Commissioner Hunter is getting at is this challenge of balancing the length of comments that are introduced into the minutes. And so actually this is a creative workaround to say, okay, hey, look, do all commissioners want to make a comment? Well, yes, we all do. And here they all are. Bam. They were read in the form of this, what we normally would consider a motion in response to an action item. But for purposes of this item, since it was informational only, we can record that all commissioners had the exact same comment to introduce into the minutes. I think that that's appropriate and a course of action that can be taken in connection with this item.
Okay, Commissioner, go ahead.
Oh, if I may, you could, we can, after your action, we can include in the minutes that the item or the the motion that was suggested by Commissioner Linke was supported by all of the commissioners, or whoever, whatever the vote is, and that will be noted in the minutes.
Okay, Commissioner Linke. Commissioner Fowler, you still have a question?
Yeah, so I want there to be in all of this, I think it's a good idea and all that, but I want there to be a way to abstain without, or not, a way of assenting with the method, but not with the opinion, right? To be able to say, I'm not ready to make an opinion, and I look forward to the time when we'll actually consider this as part of our agenda and work plan. And I think that's actually kind of an important point, because having, well, it was actually quite a while ago, I took the ethics course this year. You know, we're not supposed to actually have an opinion until we hear things out. I think that's difficult sometimes in this case, for example, but I don't want to prejudge it for the time we consider this officially. So there should be a position in our statement that says some commissioners have not made up their mind on this, or something like that.
Okay. Can that be done by by abstaining from voting on Commissioner Linke's motion?
I don't know.
Well, as per our minutes discussion, you can add, and I'd like my statement to be added, which is where we started this whole event.
Right. I think that would be reasonable. I mean, if they were to say, you know, Commissioner Fowler pointed out that his abstention simply means that he has not decided on the issue. That would be perfectly acceptable to me.
Vice Chair Perez.
Yeah, I think in the past too, with previous commissioners' responses, if we abstain, there's also a comment or a statement. I know Commissioner Linke and myself have either abstained or objected and gave a reason. So that's, yeah.
Okay. Can we go back to Commissioner Linke's motion?
I think the motion, I've read it 3 times and it was seconded, so I think we can vote. I don't see any downside.
So make sure that you have for the record. So the motion, based on what we discussed and Commissioner Hunter mentioning, the motion will be that we are voting to put your comments in the minutes, not that we are agreeing with your comments.
Oh, I thought we were voting to agree to the short motion that I had. I think my comments will be included with the public record regardless. And it'd be good to include them with the minutes, I guess. But I think my motion was more, it was a lot more focused. I didn't include all that information in my motion. It was
right, so your motion, go ahead, Commissioner Hunter.
The motion was to request that the 110 average daily trip transportation impact analysis exemption be applicable only when a project is not adding traffic to street facilities that are deficient under the growth management plan, and that the exemption should not apply to multimodal analysis.
Right, so the motion should be that you are suggesting for the staff to take that in consideration when the time comes, or as a record, not for them to do it now. And we are voting on your suggestion, not that we are agreeing with, yes, we are requiring staff to do that now. If I'm trying to summarize, and I feel so bad for Ellie when she's going to have to do this minutes.
Well, I mean, the fact is that it wasn't presented to us as we are going to do this revision. Staff has already made this revision. Perhaps it's already been applied to some projects that we don't know about yet, and it will continue to be. So I think my motion is...
Right, but it seems that we can't do anything, from my understanding legally, because of chapter 2.1 point something, number something. We can't do anything about it now. other than making sure that our voices and opinions are heard on record?
I'm just making a request that staff consider this. That's the entirety of the motion. Is that we can't tell them to do it. We're just requesting that they consider changing it now. And then everyone will probably freak out when I say the next thing. And I'm going to make another motion after this that we put the transportation impact analysis
Let's deal
guidelines.
with one motion at a time.
Well,
Don't complicate us. We barely
okay.
can handle one.
All right.
So your motion is requesting.
Just requesting that staff consider changing that exemption to not apply to multimodal or to projects that are on streets that have failed the GMP performance standard, which indirectly is also impacting the MMLOS, because this vehicle has already been deemed, we can't do anything about it.
Okay, do I have a second?
It's just a request. It won't be followed, but it's just making a statement until we can review the whole thing. And hopefully there won't be any projects that get away with not completing it in the meantime, but we can't control that.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, please note Commissioner Linke made the motion and Commissioner Pencia seconding. Can we go for a vote? Are we done commenting? I think we are, right? Because we have another motion coming, so get ready for that. Ellie?
Commissioner Wanamaker is absent. Commissioner Linke.
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler.
You're muted.
No.
Commissioner Pensiers.
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter.
No.
Vice Chair Perez.
Yay.
Chair Goken.
Yes. It passed 4-3 for records only as recommendation, with Commissioner Fowler and Commissioner Fowler Hunter saying no, and Commissioner Wanamaker being absent. Commissioner Linke, you have a comment.
Another motion. This is really simple. I'm just going to make a motion that we place the transportation impact analysis guidelines on our agenda. So this is our rules and regulations allow a majority of the commission to put an item on its own agenda, notwithstanding the chapter 120 provision that is in dispute whether an individual member can put one on the agenda, which would trump that. But I'm asking for the full commissions. I think I've heard from the rest of the commission that we're interested in seeing the full guidelines, but this will hopefully expedite that rather than taking years. I'd like to have us formally place that item on our agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, please note Commissioner Linke made the motion, Commissioner Hunter seconded. Can we go for a vote on the motion of putting the TIA on the agenda item for future meeting?
Was the TIA or the TDM?
Yeah,
The TIA, Transportation Impact Analysis.
and Bill's got a question.
Yes, Commissioner Fowler?
So what effect will that have? I mean, what does putting it on the agenda do? Does it do anything? I mean, it doesn't. I wouldn't think that it obligates staff to prepare reports and supporting information for that, or does it? What does putting it on the agenda ourselves actually do?
Commissioner
As a practical matter, it probably is just a second token effort to try to get this as soon as possible on our agenda rather than taking 2 years. But it's another effort to try to get this done. It's been on our agenda since a year ago, work plan, and it's still on our work plan for the coming year. But we think it's a really important item that we need to see like next month.
Mr. Contreras, you had some comments.
Yeah, and that's, if I'm understanding, you're asking for the commission to vote since the matter is not, the informational item is on the agenda. We can have a brief discussion about putting something on the agenda. The Brown Act allows for that. We're all no strangers to that. So that's just what I hear you saying. Okay, I just make a motion that staff, hey, put it on the agenda because that's how important it is.
Exactly. That's it.
Just that.
And just to clarify, that doesn't mean it'll ever appear on the agenda. That's up to staff?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes?
At some point, it has to, since we're voting on it.
Well, and that's why I understood. I just wanted to restate the motion as I heard it. So, as long as everyone is clear with how the motion was read, I would leave it to the commission.
Well, if I could, I'll just interject. Our objective is to work with the commission. You're a very valuable commission that we want to bring items forward. So we'll look at our workload and we'll look at when we can schedule the item, and we will definitely bring it forward. We're not going to address a minute motion from the commission.
Okay.
We appreciate that. Can we go for a vote?
Commissioner Wanamaker is absent. Commissioner Linke.
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler.
Aye.
Commissioner Pensiers.
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter.
Aye.
Vice Chair Perez.
Yay.
Chair Goken.
Yes. Please note that 6-1, Commissioner Wanamaker being absent. Okay, now let's move on. We haven't even got to really the departmental reports. An hour and a half into the meeting.